I learned that I wasn't unlucky in love. I was just lonely. Like many of you that watch my videos, I had underlying abandonment issues that, of course, I didn't know existed at that time. And I link it to a fear of abandonment because in one of my journal entries from grade 9, I wrote about this guy that I really liked. But I told myself not to pursue him because if the relationship ever ended, I'd be devastated. I was already forecasting how it would go, that it would end, and that I would be left feeling awful. So instead, I choose someone who I knew was already awful, that I didn't have a strong connection to, so that when it ended, I wouldn't feel as bad. And that's exactly what I did. Until one day, I ended up in a relationship with a guy that I really liked. And it turned out that my deep rooted loneliness as a young adult that I'd carried from my youth was now going to wreak havoc in my relationships. The problem, though, was that I made this person my everything. Sure, I had a few friends, but otherwise, I was alone. Let me read to you an excerpt from my new book called Diary of a Lone Wolf from Teen to Twenties, age 87, January 13, 1996. Last night I was talking to Ryan and he asked me, "What are you doing tonight?" I replied, "Not too much." Then he asked, "Doesn't anyone call you?" No. Then he says, "If you stay in all the time, you're just going to get lonely and depressed." So I said, "I'm already lonely and depressed anyway. I don't mind being alone all the time." But it might bother someone like him because he has a different personality than me, which isn't altogether true, but it was the only argument I could come up with. I had thought before that if our relationship ever came to an end, it would be because of my lack of friends. I found myself thinking that again. We sat in silence over the phone for a couple of minutes, which felt longer than that. I said to him, "I'm sure you're not paying to sit in silence." Then our conversation ended because it was a long distance call. I haven't even gone crazy yet, and I have one more day to conquer because it was the weekend. I've already read over 200 pages of this book I got from the library yesterday called Therapy. Eventually, that relationship would end, and likely because I enjoyed my alone time so much. But it was interpreted as a weakness and maybe even a turnoff. But as you'll read in this book of mine, I still pleaded for him to stay, and we'd be off and on for the better part of a decade. And I could never be single for long enough to realize that what I was looking for could never be found in someone else. So it was almost like I was looking to fill that loneliness with someone else. And the whole time I realized that I needed to fill it with myself and accept that sense of loneliness and being alone. And that actually you don't have to be lonely being alone. And I did have a thought about that on page 136, May 29th, 1996. On Monday, Ryan and I had sex. It had been over a week prior to that. I initiated it, and it was really good. Then he didn't call Tuesday. And today, he didn't call. And at 2:30, before he left for work, I called him. I asked why he didn't call. He got very upset. I think we're both just hanging around until something better comes along. No matter what, I can't bring it back to the way it used to be. It can be sometimes, but then 10 minutes later, he's annoyed or frustrated with me or something. I have to face it that things are different now. And this is how it's going to be. I honestly don't think he really wanted to have sex, but it doesn't matter. Maybe he did, though. He carried me from the couch to the bed. I honestly don't know how we managed to stay together. You know what thought just came over me? That I become completely independent and then Ryan's the extra. That speaks to being interdependent. I had no idea what that was, but I was catching on to it slowly. When you're lonely, you long for another person to fulfill you. But then when they're around, you feel like you want them to leave. Some people will turn to drugs and alcohol. to fill that void, to fill that loneliness. And yes, I did that too. So to transcend that loneliness meant that I also had to stop abandoning myself. And that's exactly what causes loneliness, is this feeling of being abandoned. But it's you. It's yourself that's abandoning your own worth and your own self and your own authenticity and your own trueness and your own interests and your own needs. Because once you start to show up for yourself and you say, okay, enough of that, realize this, embrace this truth, see yourself for the beauty of a person that you really are, and stop abandoning yourself. You don't need another person. You are enough. You stop feeling lonely. You stop caring what other people think about you. You stop absorbing the feelings of other people as if they're your own, as your own self-view. And then you get clearer on your path of solitude. You get really clear. And from that point, you're never lonely again. Transcending your loneliness into peaceful solitude takes time. It takes decades. You have this awareness of yourself, but you don't know what it is from, what is causing it, what is the cure. The cause of your loneliness is your own self-abandonment. And the cure is to finally show up for yourself. It's not going to take someone else showing up for you. It's going to take your own self doing that first and foremost, and then see who shows up for you. When you do that,